What's the alternative? I wish I knew, but I just unfortunately don't really know.
I heard you speak about male-female relationships, or I'm sorry, friendships. Yeah. And that, to me, I've always made friends easily with other women. And so I think, having that, and then I'll meet some of their friends or something like that. And that's a good
I've never understood the advice of not having female friends and not having male friends.
Do people actually recommend that?
Yeah. And I have so many of my clients will come to me and say, my dating coach says I should never have female friends. You're just fire them. What childish advice is that?
Jeez. Some of my closest friends are women, actually.
Yeah, my closest friends have always been male. And one of the reasons I have this perspective online where people are a bit confused why it's so masculine is because I've always had male friends. And the amazing part of male friends is you finally you don't sexualize everybody of the opposite gender.
Yes.
People without opposite gender friends, they sexualize everybody.
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody of a different gender, they sexualize. When you make friends with the opposite gender, you're less easily impressed by them because you know how the opposite gender works and you're not easily swayed by what they say and do for you. But you're also less excited by the opposite gender. It takes more than just them being a man or them being a woman for them to gauge your interest. So I think you really deprive yourself of a lot of stability when you don't have the opposite gender friends.
Absolutely. I think that's a big reason why men and women struggle to make friends with the opposite gender is that they don't know how to stop sexualizing them or seeing them as some form of other. But the crazy thing is that if you spend time as a man, if you spend time with a lot of female friends, you get really good at communicating and empathizing with women, which makes you a much better partner when you start dating.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing it does is it helps remove women off their pedestals. So many
absolutely.
men I was friends with when I was younger who may have had a little crush after getting to know me in 5 minutes, they could never in a million years. Yeah. They're like, they realize how quickly attractive, unattractive, how quickly we're all the same. Women are just simply the same. You talk to them the same way you would talk to a non-attractive partner, and it just releases that anxiety you have with talking to the opposite gender.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, they're human too.
Yeah. And they're flawed as well. And just
everybody's shit stinks. What is other than that, what else do you think most men's dating advice gets wrong?
First, with the lack of friendships, but the other thing that they do is they really place a lot of their self-esteem on the attractiveness of their partner. And they derive a lot of their ego from how attractive their partner is. And they feel really low self-esteem when they don't get an attractive partner. And they make their type an appearance. So they'll say, my type is blonde, blue eyes, or my type is brunette and curvy. But my advice is always make your type a treatment. How do you get treated by that person? If every time your type is blonde, blue eyes, but she's treating you badly, she should no longer be your type. Or if your type is this particular man and he's not treating you well, he should no longer be your type. Your type shouldn't just be a decision. It should be malleable based on the feedback you're getting from that type. So I always try and say, make your type how much do they soothe your anxieties, how good love they make you feel, how connected how do they treat you, how do you leave feeling? That should become your type.
You know what's ironic about that? I used to run into guys like that all the time. So full disclosure for listeners, I started my career as a dating coach.
Yes. And also, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mark's book and Models is absolutely fantastic. I came across it recently and I was just telling him before the show. It is still so relevant to men today, and it was written in 2011. Please go buy that book. It's fantastic. As a man, skip this podcast, go buy that book.
Your check will be in the mail. So I started my career coaching men, and I used to run into that all the time. And I remember the irony with that is that the men who obsess over getting the hot girl or the hottest girl, it's only to impress other men. Like they're actually being driven by a desire to connect with other men more than they're being driven by a desire to connect with women. And I used to try to tell this to guys, like I explain this to them, and I don't know, it would make their heads explode. Like I remember I used to ask guys, I'm like, what would you rather? Behind door number 1 is a 10 out of a 10, but she's a total pain in the ass, selfish, doesn't treat you well. Behind door number 2 is like a 6 or 7 out of 10, but she's amazing. You have so much fun with her. You're so happy with her. You like her family. You have great sex. Which door would you pick? Now, all the sane men would say door number 2, but occasionally you get a guy who would say door number 1. And I remember, like, I would just stop the entire session right there. I'm like, what are you thinking? like what is this about, really? Because it's not about women.
It's not
clearly.
about women. It's about their relationship with vaginas.
Yeah.
And one thing that's made me a little bit jaded about working, when I first came out, I was known as very misogynistic and very pro men, and I have no problem with that. I love men. I have a very good partner. I have a great relationship with my father. I have a great relationship with men. But then as I've started working with more and more men, particularly as they get more and more successful, they reduce women down to vaginas because they don't have the time to become intimate and connected to their partner as they get busier and get more successful. They reduce them down to sex, and they will risk a very stable, connected relationship with their wife and kids, which might get monotonous, boring. It happens in relationships. They will risk that for somebody who has nothing else going for them but is able to please them sexually. Are the normal men going for connection because they aren't spoiled for choice? But when men are given all the money in the world, do they become more crude in their selection?
I don't know. I mean, the short answer is I don't know.
Right.
But I think the relationship between wealth and promiscuity is pretty obvious, which is that the wealthier you are as a man, the more opportunities you're going to have.
Yeah.
And the easier it is to cover your tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you can afford to go get that hotel room for a night
and
or whatever.
And a personal assistant who will send the emails to everybody. Yeah, knows
exactly.
what she's doing.
So it's that makes sense. Like one of the things that I had Morgan Housel on the podcast months ago, and he wrote The Psychology of Money. And one of the things that he said, money doesn't change people. It amplifies what's already there. Right. So there's probably a lot of men who don't have the self-control or the correct prioritization to be in a committed relationship, be faithful, be loyal, but they also don't have the means to fuck up.
Are you a successful man who has achieved endless heights in his career? Are you somebody who's absolutely made it in his professional life, but his personal life just doesn't seem to match up? Are you somebody who goes through intense highs in business, but intense lows in your personal relationships? You might be somebody who has been blocking out relationships or entering relationships where you don't feel appreciated, or it's lacking the sexual or emotional intimacy that you require. If this sounds like you, then I have a program specifically catered to your needs. I've been helping high-end clients for a really long time, and I am able to identify the exact problems, the exact causes, and the exact solutions. So if this sounds like you, then please feel free to register below your details. Perspective to not chase more like just very shallow qualities and actually want to get to know women, actually want to connect with them coming from a pickup artist background.
So I was a little bit weird in that it took me a while to admit this to myself because I wanted to be like all broy, a man's man, whatever. Mm-hmm. The sex itself was never that interesting or exciting. It was almost the game. It was like the connection and the excitement and the flirtation and the escalation
chemistry
of everything.
Part of things.
That was the most fun. Like it took me a while to realize this, but I actually I would have a night where I would have this like amazing kind of romantic, intimate experience and not have sex with a woman, then just like find a drunk girl at the bar and take her home and bang her and forget about her the next day. Like the latter was just not very satisfying at all.
Yeah.
And eventually I admitted that to myself and realized that my issues are actually much deeper than I thought they were. And that I just kind of have this weird craving or constant desire for intimacy.
Yeah.
I wasn't finding a way to fulfill that in another way, in a healthy way. And I had a lot of commitment issues. And so I think it was a compensation of like, well, I'm terrified of commitment, but if I can just like have all these like romantic flings and like 1 week, trysts, and it can like overcome that, I guess.
So that was the mentality. But do you think that's most men confusing their desire for sex when really it's a desire for intimacy?
No, my experience is that I was the exception. Most men, they're
obsessed with it, right?
Yeah, either like some sort of sexual fixation or in most cases it was a status thing. And I think it was a status thing to come back to your point of like, they were the nerd growing up. They had no opportunities. They were looked down on. Now they're 25, 30, 35. Yeah. They're really successful, but like they've still got that.
They're stuck at 16.
Yeah, they're stuck at 16. Yeah. They still have something to prove. They've still got a chip on their shoulder. And they're like, if I sleep with a bunch of hot girls, then all the guys at work will like respect me, or then I'll be like the cool guy that everybody wants to hang out with.
And they literally get stuck at 16. I meet men that are 45, 50 years old, and they're still sexualizing 19, 20-year-old girls. And I can't wrap my head around it. But online, they give the advice that that's the way men are. But I feel like you haven't humanized enough women at that age for you to, because when you meet a 19-year-old, you should realize she's a child.
Yes.
You should realize that my desire for her is me being stuck at 16. As an adult male, I should recognize that she's not an adult enough for me to and I shouldn't be sexualizing her.
Right.
But they've pushed past that. And I don't know if that's pornography induced or if it's online information, but they somehow have pushed past their disgust and turned that into desire for girls of any age or any background, and even her financial background. They will exploit that just for their own gains. And I don't know how that's going to pan out.
So another epiphany I had at some point in my adult life was a realization that there is a difference between beauty and sexual attractiveness. That you can have an extremely physically beautiful woman who is not sexually attractive, and you can have a woman who's not extremely beautiful who is very sexually attractive. Like those two things, I think most men just couple them in their brains, and they don't critically think about that. And so they'll see a hot 19-year-old, and their just immediate assumption is like, she's hot, I want to fuck her. And it's they haven't thought through that process anymore yet, and to the point where they would have the emotional. I mean, it is essentially emotional maturity that we're talking about, of like realizing that sexualization is like almost the most primitive form of
evaluating a
person or seeing somebody, and when you open yourself up to kind of these more emotional levels, and the different dynamics that play out between two people, that you can actually lose attractiveness. I remember when I was like, because I worked with a lot of those guys, 45-year-olds who wanted to date 20-year-olds. I never really got it. But I remember when I was like 28 or 29, I went on a date with a 19-year-old. And I couldn't get through the date. I was like, I'm with a child.
Yeah,
like she is
and
literally a child. And like, there's nothing for us to talk about. There's nothing interesting going on in her life. Like, why am I here?
I feel that even when I have therapy clients, so when I have like a 21-year-old might come to me, and I almost feel guilty because I'm like, I'm getting impatient with this conversation and I'm treating you like a child when really you're coming to me for help. But because their inability to kind of complete their sentences or know their thoughts is totally what should be happening at their age.
Yeah.
But I'm coming at it as a lens as an adult. So I can't imagine being able to sexualize somebody that is still so early in their development of intelligence. And I'll get men who will come to me and say, oh, my ex-wife was a narcissist. She was so terrible. I want you to kind of work with my daughter. I don't want her to grow up like her mum. Please work with my daughter. And I'll work with their daughter, and she'll be like a 16-year-old. And she says, my dad is currently dating a 21-year-old and he's 56. And that's making me uncomfortable. So they somehow have not taken any accountability for the selection process.
Right.
They still have that poor selection and then wonder why the women that they're selecting are becoming narcissistic. It's because they can see that you desire only one trait of them and you don't genuinely care about them. You only care about what they add to your status.
Yeah.
So as a woman, she should exploit you because you're exploiting her. So she should financially exploit you, but they want her to be dedicated to him while he is utilizing her for his own status and gain. So I just think if you're a 19-year-old using and abusing a 44-year-old, good for you, because he's doing the same to you. But but he thinks he's sincere and genuine.
It's funny, like, so in the past when this topic has come up, I've gotten a lot of flack from other men who are like, I don't know.
They think we're jealous, and
they're like, oh, Mark's such a beta, like he doesn't get it. But it's funny because I used to think that way,
right?
And then I did enough work on myself emotionally and mentally to when I stopped thinking that way. And what these guys don't understand is that when you stop thinking that way, it frees you to such an extent. Like, it is a prison to see 50% of the population as vaginas.
Yeah.
It's a fucking prison. You are imprisoned by your dick, and you are captured and being forced into relationships that are not making you happy over and over and over again.
Awful.
And there's, for some reason, some men just don't see that.
No.
They're like so captured. They have like Stockholm syndrome to their cock. Like they're just like, no, this is what Dick says to do. So Dick makes me happy. And like it doesn't make you happy.
And hi guys, welcome back to my Patreon, where every single week you can tune in and get exclusive content. Not only that, but you can also message me anytime and receive a response within 20